So this video will be another video request from D-List Lovers. So thanks for putting this question forward. It's another business-y type of one just regarding the portrayal of or potential for business meetings and the conception that or perception that we come across as either antisocial. Sorry, I'm looking at my notes at the same time. Antisocial or awkward. That's what's mentioned in the question here. And they could also misread our directness as aggressive or intimidating. So a couple things before I get into maybe some tips on this. I definitely can appreciate what you're saying in this question about the intensity that we can portray. Definitely had experiences of that in business meetings in the past. So totally understand that. And what I found really interesting was when I was first starting out in my career, I had a female boss who what I would assume was definitely on the more traditional side of the female MBTI profile type, very feeling based as well. And if we were sitting in meetings, she actually mentioned to me after about how I was being very blunt in meetings. And at the time, I took it. I mean, you take it from the source. I personally didn't necessarily have a strong affinity for that leader, so I took it with a grain of salt on her perspective. However, it really did get me thinking a bit about things. And what her feeling was that I was not allowing the natural course of the meeting to take place. And it was interesting because from my perspective, and I didn't mention this to her because it's not worth the discussion, it's more of an internal idea, the meetings would be more of they were ideally supposed to be like a 30-minute sit down with a large group of multiple areas of the organization and trying to slowly cooperate towards this one project we were working on. And I had found that around the table, there was probably 20 people at that meeting, which is way big. I was hearing group think. So one person made a comment who was maybe a little bit higher up. And then a lot of people would just regurgitate the same thing. And the actual meat of the agenda wasn't being accomplished. So as INTJs, at least for myself, I find that incredibly frustrating because of the lack of utility of your time there. So for me, it was more, I felt I was summing up what people were saying so we could tidy that one agenda item up and be able to move into what's next steps in order to respect everyone's time and maintain that schedule. And the feeling of this boss in this particular instance was that more information wasn't being said in order to flesh out, and I don't like that term, but that's what her mindset was, that needed to be done. So, I mean, these are two different perspectives, but if you look at it from the MBTI standpoint, if more feeling types are in a meeting such as that, she would be not necessarily the only one in the room that might be feeling that same way. And therefore, you might be not being able to move forward in the goals you're wanting to do as for this project, because people feel that in the long range they might be shut down more. So there is something to be said about that, and something, everyone's unique. So as an INTJ, it's your own introspection on how you've noticed this in your own life, and not necessarily trying to become something you're not, because it never works out. It always comes burbling up, because your natural inclination to either optimize or strategize becomes almost overriding in the quest to do the best thing that you see for the problem at hand. All that being said, some tips I found that helped. Number one would be read the room. So when usually, like if you're in a formal meeting, you get a meeting request, you see who's invited, you see the topics ahead of time. So you're going to be doing a little bit of prep depending on, the seriousness of that meeting taking place. But once you enter that room, or if you already have previous relationships with certain individuals, you'll understand a little bit of the context. So use your observational skills to look around, see what the body language is. Are they open? Are they shut? Are people around there, just working on their phones? Are they engaging with people? If there's a lot of chitter chatter, that could mean that it could be one of those meetings that might be frustrating for you, but at the same time, this might be the group majority wanting to be that way. So I like to take advantage of that skill set to help manage how you want to be using your best assets as your own person. So a second thing too is I like to look at who's hosting the meeting. So if you're hosting the meeting, I, for myself, will start off right away by, if there's any safety items, always safety items, but as an aside. However, setting the tone. So if I was hosting, I usually like to go off where it's like, look, this meeting, my goal is to try and get everyone out of here at the time that I said, so no one's being held up. Here is the agenda. This is a loose base to jump off, and let's do some brainstorming, creative ideas, and then being able to use that as an opportunity of the strength of being direct in order to actually call out information, because you're hosting, you're not telling people necessarily how to do things. You're using your inquisitive side to pull things out of people. So if you hear something, you can draw it out. So for an example, when I've hosted a meeting, I knew that a couple of people that were in certain meetings were less likely to talk because they had problems interjecting or problems trying to find the time. Because as people know, there's certain people that have a tendency to have pauses that don't come with a natural opportunity for someone else to become part of the dialogue. So when I saw or knew people like that were in it, I would make sure to, if they were comfortable with it, to say, hey, what's your thoughts on this? I know you've been working on this side of the scope. What do you think? As a way to kind of champion the larger group. But if someone else is hosting the meeting, take a look at who it is. If that person is, say, the example of a loudmouth, overly assertive person that wants to be top down, trying to really just be a voice for other people to hear, take it for what it is. You're not going to be able to out-talk them. There's other opportunities. Like my favorite thing to do in business conversations is to actually building relationships well before any of these types of meetings take place, because then you have the back channel side of things in order to really get things accomplished and gain more information on either side. So very important, look who is hosting the meeting. Then also, we tend, depending on what, we don't like inefficiency. So we can get frustrated with inefficient meetings that just run on and nothing really is, the agenda's not getting accomplished. And that's when I know for myself, I've had in the past problems with all of a sudden not trying to run people over, but inadvertently run people over by trying to put everything concisely in from what I've heard around the table in order to move on past a point. When you start seeing tight lips like that around the table, that's what you've done, and it's not positive. You've actually set the agenda back because it is detracting. The personal has come in to the conversation subliminally and taken away focus from what the objective is. And that does have an impact on the overarching reputation of how you put yourself forward. So I feel that as INTJs, we are going to be seen differently as females. I read an interesting article. I wish I printed it off, but we're usually felt to be, somewhat the other man, something different than, the typical females. So upon meeting people, there can be a tendency for people to feel difficulty in trying to make sense of who you are, and are you just someone who is being blustery and loud, or are you being someone who's just passionate about the topic at hand? But because they don't have the typical female stereotype to fall back on in these decisions based on who you are, that can pose some conflicts, right? So they want to put a label on it and maybe go towards some of the more negative types of labels that INTJ females can find. And big thing I just want to end off on is there are going to be all sorts of people in these types of business dynamics, and looking for an opportunity to come at it from a place of, I'm going to say kindness, but really it's more of just a sense of acceptance of meeting a person where they are at, as opposed to trying to go too far and making sense of who they are at the very first initial things. Because while we're reading a room, people want to kind of label who's who in the zoo so we can move on to different topics. So I'll end with that, but it's a very interesting topic, especially right now, because of our reliance on Zoom or those types of applications that people are doing their conference calls with. And there is a little bit of a problem with trying to work through the social niceties on those. So by giving someone, say, a little bit of the benefit of the doubt from where they're coming from, that's a great thing. And also from the Zoom perspective, we hopefully will have a stronger chance of being able to make sure our voices are heard within the that type of environment, because we aren't necessarily one that is going to just sit back and observe a meeting if there's things that we need to contribute. So hope that makes sense. As always, if you have video requests, please put them in the comment section. totally love them and always write them down. And I think it really adds to the channel's interests and the larger focus for the rest of us INTJs and those who are interested in that part of MBTI. Thanks so much.